far as we know, Tristan's joining us. Yeah. Okay. For 7 years. We don't do it at a quorum without him. Hey, right.
Recording in progress.
John, you know, how are you? Okay. There you go. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'll call to order the Wednesday, October 18th meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission. If we could have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Slade.
Present.
Commissioner Cole.
Present.
Commissioner Hickman.
Present.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Yep. All right. One note, I know we're working hard. City staff, it sounds like, on getting the audio improved. I know it continues to be an ongoing challenge as someone that listens and goes back to recordings on occasion. So just a request again to try and remember to point your mouth at the microphone as much as you can, which is hard when you're trying to make eye contact as we're having a conversation, but I don't know what the happy medium is. I know they're working on stuff, but put that out there. Because I did actually run across a member of the public today who said that the audio is just awful listening to meetings. So anyway, throw that out there.
Yeah, we had our STR meeting last Monday night. Same years. So we had the STR meeting on Monday night and the audio was terrible. Last night we had the Trails Committee meeting and it was great. And then today we had Optimum come in and increase our gigabytes, put in a new router up to 1 billion gigabytes. So hopefully we're going to.
Yeah, I think that'll address part probably, but still just yeah. Okay.
Since you mentioned it, we'll go over to the fire station now.
But I don't know. Anton was in, I wasn't in, he was working, I was in the other.
You mean the router?
The range, yeah, I don't know about the range, but yeah.
Just throwing it out, that came up. Trying to get that going.
Our department was trying to have access to.
And we can probably just do that offline.
Yeah.
Just keep moving. Sorry. Yeah. All right. Approval of minutes. We've got 3 sets of minutes. The first one is the April 19th meeting. I will need to abstain from that as I was not present. But did he have any changes from that one that they wanted to see?
To approve.
All right, second. Those in favor? Aye. Aye. Right, those are those minutes. Next, we have the July 12th minutes. Tom, it looks like you were absent from that one, so you'll need to abstain from that one. But were there any changes anybody else had? I had none. Right.
I move to approve the set of minutes.
Second. Okay, motion and second for the July 12th. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? All right, 4-0 with 1 abstention. And now the September 20th meeting minutes. Everybody was here for this one. Any changes? I had none.
I just wanted to thank whoever wrote the minutes for making me sound coherent during that period where I was collabing. So thank you.
I had just one. A comment on page packet page 16.
Okay.
The second full paragraph where it starts, Parker also provided an update. I'm not objecting to anything here, but I was just curious if there were any further Coastal Commission concerns which might come up as a result of what we are going to be doing tonight in extending the closure.
No, I think they understand that is closed for the moment. We did just meet with Coastal Commission staff this Monday. And
Yeah, my only question was that they did express concerns about the closure. I just want to make sure that they're happy.
I never happened.
They're not objecting, let's put it that way.
Move to approve the September 20th minutes.
I move to approve.
Second. All right, all those in favor? Aye. 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 All right. 5-0. All right, moving on. Approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes anybody wants to make to tonight's agenda? The order or anything like that? I'm entertaining a motion to.
So
Okay. Right, those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0, moving on. Items from the floor, doesn't appear to be anybody online, and there's nobody present here but city manager Eli. So I'm gonna assume there are no items from the floor unless Eli, you had something that fell into that category, okay. All right, then moving on to the agenda items. Item number 1. Extension of the temporary closure of the Axel Muir Memorial Trail and the update on the closures. Trevor, take it away.
So time flies and we're already almost at 6 months. So if you recall, so back in April, the planning commission approved coastal development permit for temporary closure of both the Parker Creek and Axel Muir Memorial Trails. The Parker Creek closure was approved for only 2 months and it was repaired and reopened for Memorial Weekend. So that one is done for the moment. Axel Lindgren Trail, the stairs that were falling apart at the bottom were removed. So and then the matting was placed along the bottom for erosion control, still fenced off. And it's really in no condition to have public access at this time. One, it's deep and steps dangerous, wet conditions, it's slippery, as well as foot traffic could cause an issue. So staff is recommending an additional, I am suggesting a 7-month closure because that will take us to Memorial Weekend next year. That is staff's goal to have that reopened. And as far as I know, we still have not gotten a report, the GHD report on the routing for the bottom of the trail. But Eli has asked the city engineer to come up with some short-term solutions to repair the trail in place. Since it's likely that a reroute would take more than a few months. Anyway, so we're going to look at some repair options in place and present that to the. So asking them for suggestions. Just in terms of the update, the fencing along the beach was removed.
All right, any questions from the commissioners for Trevor?
I have one question and a comment. One question is this appealable to the Coastal Commission again?
The extension, yes, yeah.
Okay. And there's nothing in the Coastal Commission rules that say that once it's been deposed at the Coastal Commission, that there cannot be another appeal. I mean, it starts the clock over again, I assume.
And for the extension,
Yes.
as opposed to the original,
Yes.
yes, it would start immediately.
And then my comment is, and I know that this is probably falling on deaf ears, but I would really like to see at least some sort of schedule from the management team on when various things are going to happen. And what I mean by this, we're currently waiting for this report. We understand the report's available or has been published. But we, meaning the city, has not seen it. The management team, I know, has a lot on their plate, lots of moving parts, but I think it's incumbent on us to ask them for at least some top level milestones that we can pass on to the public. You know, we said we were not going to close this more than 6 months. And now it's another 7 month in extension, and just concerned that come next May that we will not be prepared to open it. So my comment.
I heard at the trail meeting last night that they were going to look at it, Central Society at the next week in November. And, but that they did receive the report and wanted to look at it with everybody before joining into the city about it. So that's what I heard. You stay correct if you were he's correct.
Yes, you are correct. I had requested that it be released to the city, and they said that they wanted to either present it at a city council meeting or the Jurai management team meeting. And then last night indicated they decided to present it at the Jurai management. So that once we'll receive it after that, and
Just for the record, the city paying for it.
no, the seventh generation grant funds that the Jurai received. That's paying for it.
What is the next scheduled team?
It's in November, but I'm not sure exactly.
Are those open to the public or no?
Well, we'll have to see if they don't have anything of cultural significance, then we'll have it. Chances are, since we're going to be talking about the trail, they might have something regarding that. So we'll find out ahead of time. So anytime there isn't anything of cultural significance, recommendations to have a meeting open. We have had a meeting open since I've been here. But the others, obviously, it was before GG. Once we formed GG. 5 times, one of them.
Is there a way ahead of the meeting for you to reach out to them and express a desire to craft that portion of the meeting in such a way that as much as can be open, and they could perhaps adjourn to something akin to closed session?
Yeah,
Because I know I would love to go to it and hear about it, both as a resident and as a planning commissioner.
yeah.
And I think if we wait for them, they might not think of that, but if we suggest it, perhaps it might be something that they had not thought of as a compromise. You know, because understanding the need to protect the cultural resources and where that stuff is, but I think there might be some way to do something that could work.
Yeah, we can ask ahead of the meeting which portion that they could consider.
And are they down with this opening in from Memorial Day? So
Well, we
they've been
mentioned that at the management team meetings, that that's our goal is to have it reopened by the next year. As Trevor was mentioning, I asked the city engineer to come up with options. So I think the main easy way to access the beach from the base of the trail, and otherwise possibly repair steps. He's in a short-term measure. Make sure it's safe.
Yeah, I think at least Commissioner Cole had asked maybe others about the possibility of having a closed meeting with them. Is that something that was discussed, and was that feasible? I think Commissioner. That's not.
I have no idea.
I think the planning commission as a body would have to have an open meeting. But if you wanted to designate a committee of 2 members that's not a quorum, then you could have a closed session meeting.
Something to look into, yeah, as an option. Who would we reach out to know if that's even a tool that we can utilize?
Oh, that's our G to G policy that we also apply.
And the planning commission would fall under that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what would apply to the Jurai management team. Otherwise, the Jurai and Central Society, if you only meet with them and they agree to meet with you, then that could be closed. That's not required on their end, but on your end, it would be required. So that's why I would suggest 2 representatives.
I have a couple questions and a comment. First is procedural. This proposed 7-month additional closure. That would not go into effect until after the appeal period. Is that correct?
That's correct. So I'm estimating the date, that would expire early in June 2024. So the appeal period ends 10 days after the coastal commission receives this. Well, they just recently called that into question, but
It's not, I thought it was a month past this meeting.
I do need, so in most instances, the local appeal period runs and then there's a coastal commission appeal period. Our ordinance, even first, we certified they made some mistakes and it's written so that the appeal period runs concurrently and our appeal period starts when the coastal commission receives it. So it's always been 10 days. They just, with the ranchery, with the after the fact permit from last month, they said, oh, no, you can't send us a notice of action until your appeal period's over. But I need to talk to them about, and I have talked to staff about this in the past, but it's new staff, so.
I'm sure it was gonna go month on.
It potentially could. So it could be in June. I mean, a 6-month would be, should take us to mid-May, and that, I mean, maybe that's close enough.
Another question I had, maybe for you, Eli. This commission, since through the last closure, been asking for temporary reopening measures. To the TNT or to us. I guess my question is why it's taking until now to start drafting those.
Well, our city engineer was preparing a report. Dry management for the Jurai Ancestral Society. So it has been mentioned that we want to have it open. So we'll just try to get it as soon as we can. Suggest. Yes, I was hoping whole minute. The whole yes, since they didn't release it up until next month, then see how it.
So the goal now is to start working on temporary measures, even if you don't have a set report.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the goal, the report will be available, like I said, November, somehow, somewhere between the second, it's 5 minutes. Massive news on vacation this week. See it. Otherwise, just reviewing the report will be able to give us an idea of some of the things that it's suggesting. And then we can say, okay, why don't you?
I guess lastly, looking back at the motion, the conditions, or the way it was conditioned 6 months ago, condition number 1, at the very end, let's see, it says, unless an extension is granted by the planning commission based on the need for more time to obtain funding, further explore repair and access alternatives if the planning commission finds that substantial progress has been made in the initial time period. Currently, I can't find any substantial progress has been made. to look at explore, repair, and access alternatives, temporary measures. So I mean, I'm hung up on that condition for doing this.
If you
That's
want, you could, yeah, if you want, you could request like an update in 3 months or something like that. Otherwise, we can give you your monthly update and then let you know how we're progressing.
If I can, I think, pick up the same thread, I'm really frustrated tonight to have this in front of me and not have anything that we've been asking for repeatedly. This was approved in April. In the July minutes, I thought very clearly directed that we wanted a plan B. We brought it up again in August. And now before us tonight, when we're up against the wall for an extension, we have no plan B still. Our plan was just simply to hope that plan A materialized. And that's incredibly frustrating for me and why I will struggle with a 7-month extension, because I have no faith or very little faith that something will change between now and then realistically with the final plan. We depend on staff to carry out what we ask for. And I just personally don't feel like that's happened with this at all. And it's incredibly frustrating. This is a big issue. There's a lot of concern about this from the public level, and it's just not, it's not there. I mean, we're up against a wall, and there's been no plan B yet. And I guess I don't understand how we could have been or should have been more clear with our direction to develop that.
Yeah, so when we were looking at it, is that we were hoping that as soon as the report was done, we would get it up. And I've been frustrated because I've requested it several times. Management team meeting, and they haven't produced it. First, they said they needed to go to the board for the Ancestral Society. And then later on, they said that they wanted to present it at a meeting, the council. Then this last time they said they wanted to present it at the jury management. I was hoping that we would receive the plan, review the plan, and then by next Memorial Day, hopefully have those improvements done. But if we can't do all those improvements, then the plan B is for next year, meaning, after the rainy season, that we would do whatever short-term necessary. Just like we were able to do the short-term. Either way, it's been clear that we want to have the trail open. Yes.
Yeah, I guess my recollection is that, that's plan A. And I understand all the things that have gotten in the way of that. I felt as though we were very clear in saying we wanted to see options for, while that's happening, what can we do to reopen it as soon as possible? And it's been 4 months. It's been 4 months and that hasn't happened. And I don't think it's a good plan for us to continue to hope for plan A to materialize in a timely fashion. So I guess I'm asking very clearly, come back to us with the plan B on what it is to reopen it now in a temporary fashion, right? Because I understand the end goal is to reroute it to a better location, right? But again, the goal is to restore access, at least in the interim, while this is going on, because my personal concern is that it's going to languish and this is going to go on. And we already have one trail in town that has a de facto closure right now, right? Because of serial extensions. And I just can't support that happening to another critical trail in town that is one of 2 access points to that beach. Just the substantial progress piece, I feel similarly with that, having spent a little bit of time on the Trails Committee, the fact that these discussions are happening, the fact that there's a study being done, I have a little bit of faith with that. That feels like the time scale obviously isn't what I would love to see, but it does feel like there's at least something happening in the background, at least. It's in the background. That's the frustrating piece for me, not knowing this and understanding the challenge to be transparent with this because of cultural resources and all these things. But All right, that's really all I have on that. All right, anybody from the public? I see Councilman Tuttle has joined us, but I'll open it up for public comment if there is any. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commissioners for any additional discussion or questions.
I've got a couple of questions. The first is, we have been waiting for those reports to be produced, right? Or at least shared with us. And if a rerouting of the trail is there, that seems like it's going to take a considerable amount of time. If we get that report tomorrow, so a year to get the trail rerouted, perhaps multiple years. And so I think that, yeah, moving forward with some short-term solution to get the trail to the SAP is of both immediate benefit and then buys us some time while that reroute process is actually taking place. I guess my other question, that's a concern, is whether there is significant burden placed on staff if we opt for several serial extensions rather than 1 7-month extension. For a time to compel action is actually tremendously burdensome for staff.
It's a little more work, but I think, but it wouldn't be a ton more work. I mean, I'm providing you monthly progress reports anyway, so it's on the agenda anyway. Yeah, I will say, I think, particularly with the Van Wyck project, we have had a fire lit under us. It's always taken time. That Eli has asked the city manager to come up with some short-term fixes, and we're going to present those to the management team. And I think the city will likely opt to move forward with those, regardless of, maybe in some ways, regardless of what, even if the management team wants to take a reroute, I'm not just. I think the Coastal Commission is also and a protection. Soon.
It's hard to guess what's on a report that we haven't seen, but is it a fairly safe assumption that the current route will not be? It's pretty likely there will be substantial change.
The management plan from 2007 now it's adopted, I think, and that recommends rerouting the base of the trip. So that has been something that the Ancestral Society has wanted for a long time. So yes, I think that is very likely the end result. But like you said, a reroute is likely to take a year.
Sorry, any sense of where that kind of begins on it? That you can speak to, or
where the reroute begins?
Yeah, where the area of concern is without.
I believe they wanted to curve more off to the left. So they wanted to follow the traditional trail. So that's, but then, so I think what the engineers looked at is how feasible is that? What will that take? Because there are some wet areas there, some things have changed. So what will that? We haven't seen the report, so
And when you say left, would that take it more towards the Parker Creek Trail or
To the west.
to the west?
So towards Launcher? Okay.
And all I know from my, impression from them in discussion is basically that it would be mostly where it drops right now. So somehow, somewhere right before it drops, it'll be diverted to its west.
So, two questions. Yeah. Who's paying for Plan A? The actual work. I understand that the Ancestral Society has funded the study.
Right.
Who's paying for the actual?
It hasn't been determined. First of all, we don't know what the exact cost is.
No, I completely understand that.
Right. But I've told the Ancestral Society, I told them, if you expect the city to be paying for it, we need the report. So, like, for the city property.
Yeah, and I think,
City direct.
yeah, and I appreciate that. And, you know, realistically, and I appreciate what you're saying about what would happen if we until closures, or I mean, extensions. But with the winter coming, not having the report, getting RFQs out, evaluating them, actually starting to work in the midst of the winter, as I said, I don't see any benefit of that because, as you just said, it's going to be a year before ready to start. The other thing I would just point out too, and I don't know this, but at one time, I do recall that the Ancestral Society wanted to move the entrance to the trail on the bluff as well. So if that's part of the report, that also just makes it more complicated. So
Yeah, and that could very well be. So, we'll see the report, but you're right, that has been mentioned.
Yeah.
Although that has been done to some degree by removal of retaining wall by the lighthouse and removal of the lighthouse. So
maybe that's not a big issue then any longer. I know.
but I do think they want that western where the access used to be. Well, that has been, the walkway that was removed, so that has been removed. So I think the entrance has been restored to basically where the traditional.
Okay. And the Trails Committee is actually discussed with the representative from the Churi, and the representative from the Churi said that they wanted to take it back to the Ancestral Society to discuss how they're going to have the talk, you know. So we'll see if that's going to be addressed in the report or if they're going to address it to the Ancestral Society. But either way, the goal of the city is number one, have it above ground. Number two, ideally to keep it open. You know, even when they're doing the bulk of the work or rerouting base west, because it seems like that could be done separately. And maybe if there is any needed closure, it could be a couple of days or something just to connect the two or whatever.
A procedural question for if the city were to in some fashion reopen on a temporary basis, what permitting timeline does that trigger for the city as far as permits for construction, that kind of stuff? It's been removed. Is it still considered repair? Just trying to think, working backwards from a desired date of like Memorial Day.
That's a good question. And you know, maybe in a future update, I could provide a sort of timeline backwards. I do, you know, I guess I will walk back a little bit. So policy 69 does require the Ancestral Society's approval of any work with soil disturbance. So if we're just repairing maintenance, you know, that could move forward potentially, but
so as far as what I could gather, whatever few steps may need to be improved for the short term, I would consider that maintenance, and then the whatever is going to connect short term to beach, that's the part that would need some kind of, it's more than likely steps done at the end.
Any other questions?
I want to mention, I understand why the rules are centered around Royal Day and Labor Day as being the book as a typical tourist season. There's 300 residents of Trinidad who also use our trails and we're here year round, or not all, of course, but a big proportion. It's a nice public space, but it's Trinidad, regardless of the extent to which tourists.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Certainly, we would want to have it open as soon as we can. So I just have that as a deadline, that no matter what, we want to have it open by then. And I think it's in the interest of the Ancestral Society also, because they always say that they would rather have the trail open, and they don't want people meandering in areas that don't have a trail. So if we can have the trail open and just direct people that way, they'll be happy, we'll be happy. Sometimes people might create their own trails.
Yeah, to that note, I was just down there today, and people are obviously going around fences and.
The actual entrance?
Correct. There's an obvious path, but why look, it came up from the bottom, there's an obvious path around the fence. Some people are crazy.
Right. Any other discussion? I'll take a stab at a motion. As written, but two changes I'd like to make. I'd like to add a condition, but under condition 1, I'd like to modify the time frame from 7 months to 4. Because I feel like that gives a decent length of time to make some progress. I just can't see my way to 7. To me, and then the condition number 2 would be that the city managers to return before or no later than 1 meeting before the next extension period with a plan B, a development plan B.
That's the big condition.
Certainly we can aim for that.
I mean, I guess Eli, to put you on the spot, is that reasonable? 4 months to have the city engineer come back with what plan B would look like? That gives all winter. I know they're busy, but this is.
Yeah, coming up with plan B should not take much time. But as far as doing work, depending on whether likely depends on how long it's going to take. But see it be realistically done maybe until maybe March at the earliest.
Sure, I just want to have a plan B.
But certainly coming up with a plan, especially because he didn't work for the plan A, coming up with plan B should only take maybe a month, the maximum. So.
I think semantics, but I would just like to add that you specifically said plan B. The plan B is going to be plan A for a substantial period of time, right? Like the trail is likely to be opened in some fashion that is not the route recommended by the engineer's report. So in my opinion, the city should be moving forward with a plan A, which is opening that trail as soon as possible, with the intent to ultimately implement the reroute when the information is available.
Yeah, I guess.
I understand it's semantics, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, otherwise you could just call it the temporary opening.
Right, temporary, yeah.
Yeah, let's.
Temporary.
So instead of plan A, plan B, right? Okay.
Let's call it short term.
Yeah. All right, so I'll try this again here. Based on the fact that current conditions at the base of the trail are hazardous and unstable, I move to extend the coastal development permit for the temporary closure of the ALMT for another 4 months, as conditioned in the original approval with the modification of condition 1 as follows, changing 7 to 4, and then the addition of condition 2. The city manager returns to us with a temporary reopening plan no later than 1 meeting before the next expiration of this extension.
Can I just ask really quickly your rationale for 4 rather than 3 or 2 or 5?
5 feels too long. 3, there's the holidays getting in the way. We've got November, December. I want to be realistic with that, January. That's where I came up with 4.
Okay, thanks.
So the current one would expire when, in November, Trevor?
Yeah, and so 4 months from the effective date, so this will go into effect, say early November, so November, December, January, February. So it would end early March, so we'd have to come to you in January. Session would probably need to be February.
Is there a CDP required for adding stairs? Or?
Sorry, just point of order. I mean, there is a motion. Is there a second for it? And then we can have some discussion on the motion, I guess, if it, or it'll just kind of float away into nothingness, which is fine too, if we want to try something different. Right. So we'll come back to the discussion then. Perfect. I just want to kind of procedurally keep us clean.
Again, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. I think I understand what you're trying to do, and I share your frustration. But I don't see that it's any value added for us to come back and look at this in 4 months when in fact there really is no benefit to that. I do like number 2.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. I think it would be valuable to have the city manager or staff return with the short-term repair plan. That makes a lot of sense. But any of these things, because of some of the things that you've already mentioned, which is holidays,
right,
winter, 4 months is not going to, all that does is just bring it back to us. We have another of talking about it, in my opinion. I would just assume, my feeling is that I would leave it the way it is, but add condition number 2.
So, okay, that makes sense. I guess the itch I'm trying to scratch with this whole exercise is I really don't want to come back in 7 months and just then learn about what a temporary measure might be. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want those two things to be
I'm sorry.
concurrent. You know what I mean?
I misinterpreted what then condition 2 was. I thought that was to be done in like the next month.
No, hopefully, yeah.
Well, I think, why don't you put a deadline on condition, the other condition?
What you
And
said, yeah, 3 months.
so, maybe,
But does that
and we
make sense?
do have a condition 2, so this would be condition 3. Condition 2 is the monthly report, so I will still provide monthly reports. And then you could make condition 3 be, maybe at the February meeting, staff comes back with a proposed plan.
And then if you want to call it by February, as soon as I have it from Steve Allen, I'll let Trevor know, and then we can get it on the agenda.
And
I think we should also, it'd be nice, I think, to go to the TNT too, before we.
And when you say the plan, you mean
The temporary.
short-term repair plan.
Short-term.
Thank you. All right.
And can you get me caught up, Trevor, on the conditions? I was looking at packet page 25 for tonight's, where there's just one.
So you are extending the permit 2023-03, and that had 2 conditions on it, and
Okay.
those conditions remain. I was just amending condition 1, but condition 2 would remain. And then you are at.
Okay, so technically the condition on page 25 replaces or amends the condition from the original one. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll be technically condition number 3. Who knows, maybe we'll have the main plan by then too, right? And all this will be a smooth exercise. We hope. All right, well, then I guess we'll take another stab at it. Is there any more discussion?
I would, this is not gonna be the same favor as my voice. I thought that a little longer support for the original motion.
Again?
I said I would voice support for your original motion.
I would as well, actually. I think I like the idea of having thought about it some more. I think the 4 months thing. Well, I understand there's holidays and winter time. We're only asking for a plan. And I think that really like set the more concrete deadline. City to come back just with something concrete plan.
Oh, well, there's like two things there. One thing is a plan, the other thing is an extension. So, I reconsider the whole extension in 4 months. But if you just want the plan within 3 months or whatever, like February, it's a separate issue.
I do think, because I think it holds us accountable the same way, really, because we can't, even if we have a plan for temporary repair next month, probably should put it in until after.
I guess I understand that, but I mean, personally, I'm prepared to not approve this motion, should we have one. And I think that having it in 4 months is like puts pressure on the city, I guess. It's maybe we will approve it tonight, maybe we won't, but if it does get approved, maybe in 4 months, there will be people on this committee who will not, or this commission who will not want to approve it. And I think the city is pretty clear that they don't want this trail to go. And so I'm not trying to like turn it into like a hostage situation, but maybe in a little bit I am, I guess.
Yeah, so I'll just give you my perspective. I would think 5 months would make sense, which would put us somewhere in March, because I would think the rainy season should definitely cover January, and then hoping that February is halfway decent, that we could start on it. And then at least by March, hopefully it'll be done. And if it's not done, then we might ask for another month or so extension.
Okay, so I'll ask the question. What happens if we don't approve this extension tonight?
I think staff would bring it to the city council. Because we can't, there's no way to open church, we can't just open church.
That's my point. There's no way that we can go through this process and every once in a while say we're going to not approve this extension because it's going to get kicked to the city council and they will immediately, they will override us. That's what I'm trying to say, because we're just not adding any value to this process. My point.
Yeah, no,
My personal point.
And I hear you, and they may or may not override us. They have that right.
Of course.
But I'm curious, Tom, you're on the Trails Committee. Do you have any thoughts we haven't heard? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, what I'm hearing is, I don't want to wait until Memorial Day to make that day, the day it's going to be open, one way or another. And I'm even considering putting a sign up here on the top saying, per Eli, it will be open. Memorial Day weekend. Or the for anybody to know. Or the city council or whatever, or for the planning commission. That's what I'm thinking, out of wildfire. And so the 5 months would then to make it sound like there's going to be another option coming, whether or not we can take steps. Like years, something else is going to happen, and it's going to help on the state. You're on a good track. Go in there. Open one there.
Thing that you could do is like with your proposed signage, is basically say that the planning commission has approved an extension to blank. It will expire blank. I'm just.
We just fill in the blank on a monthly basis. Okay,
Like
that's
the
good.
last day injured, kind of a tank tag thing.
Technically, why Memorial Day? Because I mean, one way or another, that's what I've told people, and that's what I feel it makes sense, because it is a short-term fix. And, no more than a few of the steps that I would see, at least just to get by. I mean, in the long term, you might want to replace maybe all the steps, but short term, just something that works. And then somehow having something down to the base, which might be, I know before there was that somewhat like a ladder that had ropes on it. So whether it's something like that or actually steps, like a ladder steps that you go down, somehow just safely get down there, with some kind of rail, just on one side. Yeah, it just seemed like something like that. Actually, once we get the short-term proposal, they can possibly be constructing whatever would go there, which would be steps with railing on one side. And then there, maybe put together in a couple of parts. One part would be steps, one part, right? Just replace a few of the steps. Just seeing what will it take to safely get people down there until future.
And just for my brain, I mean, technically the city could decide to repair and reopen. They have that right as the property owner, right? I mean,
under policy 69, there are certain approvals that are required for soil disturbance. So how exactly that plays out,
assuming there were still anchor points for the cable log system to be reintroduced, a new one that's in, I'm just theoretically, right? I'm not advocating that at all right now as the approach, because I also appreciate that there's a balance we're trying to strike between opening it, but also allowing time for these discussions, which I feel are going on at a relatively breakneck pace previous to, my short time in this community. I don't want to derail those by pushing something like this into the mix and adding a new,
I think, one scenario could be for a simple repair. I think someone mentioned at one of our meetings, the temporary cable steps that they put at the bottom of the agate. So something like that, maybe not again. And hopefully the Ancestral Society would agree to something like that in the short term. If they don't, I imagine, that puts the city in a difficult position. Then if you approved an extension, it would likely be appealed to the coastal commission.
I would like to, after the show meeting yesterday, it was encouraging. There was a good talk. And it did seem in good faith that it's up and hopefully something really good. So we want to be good neighbors too. Good at that, but yeah, whatever.
It's also possible that regardless of the timeline, that's the Ancestral Society.
Just as likely that whatever the plan is, they could think is great, and then we move forward with that too, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, all options are.
Right,
Right.
quick and simple, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, but
Okay.
nothing's ever something.
I have one more comment to make. I promise I've exhausted all of my thoughts on this, which is that November is the rainy season too. Right, so our original closure with an end date of November was also the rainy season.
That's a good point. Yeah. So I think from my perspective, I will support this regardless of
Which this is this,
your motion,
the original.
but the amendments. that
Right,
you made,
okay.
I will support that. I personally don't feel that it makes much sense, but I will support it because I think we need to move on here and get the ball rolling again. And so I'm willing to support your motion as amended. But maybe you should read it back to us. Just
I
to
think
make
I probably
absolutely
should,
sure.
yeah. I think that would kind of sign off. All right. Let's try this again. Based on the fact that the current conditions of the base of the trail are hazardous and unstable, I move to extend the coastal development permit for the temporary closure of the ALMT for another 4 months as conditioned in the original approval with a modification of condition 1 as outlined below, and then maintaining condition 2, and then adding condition 3, which is a city manager designee to return ideally before or no later than 1 meeting prior to the next expiration with a temporary reopening plan, and really encouraging to have it a lot sooner. Toward the end, but anyway, so that's how do I do it?
I second that.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
I
Opposed? All right. Thanks. Good discussion, everybody. It was what I thought might take some time tonight. All right, number 2. It's only 7. General plan update, cultural historic resource element. Trevor, this is discussion only, as I understand it from the agenda, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we do have a LCP grant, and one of the tasks is working on the cultural historic preservation element of the general plan. I did send copies of the version that you got out to both, to the Yurok tribe, the Rancheria, and the TAS. I did have a chance to meet with the Rancheria and get comments from them back in February. I have followed up with the other 2 groups. I did hear from the Tipo of the Yurok tribe, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and she has provided comments and passed them to their attorney. So that they are moving forward with their comments. And then we did hear from Sarah with the TAS, and they've had a lot on their plate with reviewing the hazards planning report, and other issues that they have been busy with. So they asked for more time to look at this, and I assured them that this was not intended to be approved at this meeting tonight. This is just the start of a discussion. I have not incorporated the Rancheria's comments because I wanted to hear comments as well. Also, there's a missing section. So the city attorney had advised me to remove the section on what I had been calling the terrain management area is different, because that's the 12.5 acres, which is a little bit different than what's mapped as the Turai study area. But the Turai Ancestral Society would prefer to just have the 12.5 acres called the Cherry Study Area because it's been referred to that in the management plan application for so many years, so, I'll put it back to the Cherry Study Area and just, it's gonna be remapped. Exactly what that is, and so it's a missing section anyway, and names. Already talked about some of that. So this is just the start of a discussion, and there will be additional hyper input. So I just want to get.
Any questions on the staff report?
Oh, and then also it also provides an update on other general plans.
From the staff report?
I guess I'll start. So Trevor, we have a substantial amount of background information in the appendix. How much of control do we have over those? It looks like a lot of it's mostly, I should say a lot of it looks like policy, state policy, federal policy.
Yeah, I think the appendices, and that was why I moved them out of the document, is let's see, so there are 3 appendices, I believe. So there's a glossary. I think some of those are defined in and a lot of those are defined in other laws, but I'm not 100% sure on all those definitions. The tribal consultation guidelines are from state guidelines, but I think we should also add the city now consultation policy. So I think we should include that as well in here. And then appendix 2.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
What should be appendix 3 is just a summary of the federal and state laws.
I just, wanted to understand how much interaction we needed on that. A couple of other quick comments. One is that this is probably the place in the general plan, and I'm just saying this, take it for what it's worth, where it might be very useful for the city to make a land acknowledgement statement. And for obvious reasons, but I think that is, this is certainly an appropriate part for the general plan. And, everybody has their own land acknowledgement statements, but I thought HCOG's was pretty good, although it's a little bit more general for the whole county. But the Trinidad Coastal Land Trust also has one that's a little bit more tailored for the Yurok area, Yurok tribe area. The other thing, 2 other things. One is, and I always say this, there's a whole bunch of programs in this thing again. I mean, we're programmed to death. It's just, and some of them look like it'd be maybe condensed, collapsed into, make them a little bit, but there's an awful lot of programs here, once again. And then the final thing, and this is just something that I've experienced, I guess, over the last couple of years, is that with respect to paragraph B, background, there's multiple stories to be told. And even among the different tribal organizations, there are different stories. And this tends to be a little bit Yurok-centric, but not is, and there's nothing wrong with that, except that that's not the whole story. And the fact that we don't have the Yurok comments or the Ancestral Society comments, personally, I don't see any reason to review this until those comments are in, because we'll be chasing our tail until we actually have comments from each of the tribal organizations. So, at some point we will have to discuss it, but I don't see any reason for it tonight. There's too many stories that have not been told. And then obviously there's other stuff during it, but
Yeah, I had a question. So that you've reached out to the Yurok tribe and Trinidad, and that's it? Or I guess
And the TAS, you said, right?
And the TAS.
yes.
I did, that's a good point. So when we have to look at what year, when we kind of restarted looking at the general plan, I did send out formal offers for consultation on the general plan update in general. And that did include a much broader list of tribes. So everything on the, so we sent a request to the American Heritage Commission, and they sent all this back. And so I sent a letter to all of those and only responses we got back.
Just a general question. The grant timing that you mentioned, what's that deadline that we're up against? Just so we can kind of keep that in the back of our minds.
Already passed it.
Okay.
No, I can't remember. Maybe, but we did amend the timeline already. It's because also the coastal hazards planning process is behind. So we're already behind schedule on that grant, but it does go through the end of 2025. Now that does include an update. You know, I figured at least the whole last year will be updating the zoning. So I'd like to be done with the zoning. But there is time. I don't have it right in front of me.
That's fine. Okay. And then with that, kind of a follow-up to that, do you think it's likely that the missing section will be something that we could reasonably expect to include and meet that deadline?
I hope so. I mean, you know, litigation is, it is what it is, but Eli and I are going to meet with Russ actually tomorrow and talk about city council session, I guess. And then I think there has been a trial date set for next. I don't know.
So were you suggesting then that it's not like wait for the whole document, or do you?
Oh, no, I'm
just
sorry.
section B.
I would suggest B and probably is that C?
Maybe the portion of B and C, right?
Yeah, B and C. And then I think we can definitely work the numbering's kind of weird here, but general cultural resource protection on page 4. This is where we actually get into the specifics. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I just wanted to clarify.
Right.
Okay. Well, then shall we kind of go through page by page and then maybe jump past those sections? Does that seem reasonable to skip those sections until we get comments from the?
It does. I have one more question for staff, which is, do other cities on the North Coast already have multiple historic resources? Yes, I'm asking this because
They do. This was modeled after Humboldt counties because it was the most recent at the time. So a lot of these policies are in. They're fairly general.
I meant to revisit the 78 plan, but this doesn't exist. This is a new creation for us, a new element, right? Okay. All right.
I mean, there is a policy. There's a couple of policies related to historic resources in general.
I did want to say I really echo Richard's sentiment on a land statement. Thanks, great spot for that, and something the city I would totally support. All right, page 1. Anything under the purpose, I guess, really jumped out at anybody?
I have a general question that it seems to me that there's this dichotomy between cultural resources and historic resources, where resources tend to refer to and then it seems that the historic resources tend to be skewed more towards typical buildings, once white people should. Right? And I'm not sure that dichotomy needs to exist. Like I know that there's some of the various definitions, like accessible science are included as buildings, for example. But it does seem like the historic resources section, which we'll get to in just a moment, it does seem sort of unnecessarily separate from stuff. Essentially on page 1, it's there in the outline. Sorry, I mentioned that.
Part of that is because the laws treat them differently. But they could be more integrated, different ways of integrating them.
I mean, I'll try to cite more specific examples.
I did just have, I know it's kind of delving a little bit into background, but on page 3, sorry, anything on page 2? We're kind of skipping, right, until we get some comments. I just had a question on page 3, the last paragraph of before C starts. It talks about there are currently 2 the city interacts with on a regular basis. It doesn't list the 3. I didn't know if that was intentional, or it lists the Yurok tribe and the Rancheria. Something to think about is going forward.
Well, all we would have to do there is just say federally recognized.
Yeah,
Okay.
the tribal governments.
Okay.
Is how they're.
Yeah.
You've been referring to them in the coastal hazard.
Right, so then maybe make that clarification so that's at least contextualized. Anything in section C that we thought we could, I did have one kind of just general request for this to go through, and any acronyms, make sure that we're spelling them out the first time. There were a couple, NAGPRA, and then NHC shows up in the appendix finally as under the definition, but the other one I could never find.
Probably because I took,
Yeah.
that used to be in the front, so yeah.
So anyway, just I was like that at the beginning of the document to have that second. At a broad level. See on page 4. Question under cultural 1.1. The first line, identify potential for significant impacts, and it says design phase of city projects. And my question was, is that capturing only projects that belong to the city of Trinidad, or any project that occurs within the city of Trinidad? What should be?
Well, it is a procedural difference in that we can't, when we get an application, the design is done. And we can send it, and I send it to as referrals to tribes. So we can't do consultation on a private person's design, but we can on this.
Gotcha. Okay, it's because of the design. That's not
Perhaps maybe to say city sponsored projects.
Sure.
What did it say projects in the city too?
Was it important, Trevor, to you to have the design spelled out in that?
I think so. I mean, I think, we should be consulting, I think, with the tribes before we have, before we submit a permit application for city projects.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. Anything else on page 5? Kind of general stuff. Six.
Just a nit under cult 1.5, work with the sheriff's department. I would suggest maybe making that law enforcement agencies, only because we never know where we're going to get our security from.
So broaden it to include, folks like the private security contractor, right? It's because they're a new,
Yeah.
we have a contract with them now for service, so they're going to be fulfilling that role. And then I had a general question on that. How is that done? And is that really, I mean, I don't know, probably don't have the answer tonight, but what does that look like? The city working with law enforcement, security, and the tribes to ensure that,
I think.
how does that happen?
Well, I think it's just, I think, and probably in general, they're becoming more aware of these issues in general, but I think, making sure at least the person who's assigned to Trinidad is aware of where looting might occur or something like that. There are specific training, I think, for law enforcement on how, what the laws are and what they have the authority to do or what's legal. Could be sending them a formal training. It could just be communicating with them about what and where to look out for.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm just if we're going to put that in here, just understanding what it means. Did you have anything on that?
The other thing they have mentioned, meaning at the Churai management team, we actually had one of the lieutenants from the sheriff's office. And I was going to suggest using the word office if you use sheriff instead of department. But anyway, a suggestion, one of the things that the Churai thought might be useful would be to have some kind of signage saying, if you see any kind of theft from this area, to call 911.
Thanks.
And apparently there was a sign up in Crescent City by St. George, which is by the airport in Crescent City. That's along the beach there that they like, so it's similar to that sign. But anyway, they were suggesting the sign also.
Anything else on 6? How about 7?
Yes, under paragraph 3. Trevor, I'm a little confused there. It says the city must consult with tribes before designating open space if the affected land contains a cultural place and if the affected tribe has requested public notice. What public notice are you referring to?
So this is, I believe this is straight from the CEQA guidelines, 8052 consultations. That process was a little different from the 18 consultation, where technically they are supposed to formally request to the city that they want. We send them anyway. So there's a notice of preparation. There's a notice of intent. So there's various notices that are required for CEQA documents.
Okay, so that's what you're referring to with the public notice phrase under government code.
Oh, no, that is the general plan. I'll get you some more information on.
Similar vein, is that a blanket notice that they can request from the city one time, or do they have to kind of be looking every time to try and just trying to be,
I mean, we send it anyway at this point, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Or anything else on 7? 8.
Yeah, I guess a question to since the city must consult these tribes identified by the NHC. Oh, okay, never mind.
Anything else on 8?
Yeah, under code 3.2. I get it all, and it talks about landowners involved in the particular planning activity, and I was just trying to remember where I saw, but there was something else in here that talked about the NDA, the landowner might have to sign, and some other policy issues. And I thought that maybe that should be brought up here to this point, because this is the first time that we talk about landowners, and it might be appropriate to bring that up at this paragraph.
3.5
3.5
has the NDA.
Yeah. In fact, yeah, just move that to maybe right under 3.2.
All right, that was 9. How about 10?
I have something here, but I need it.
4, obviously, Trevor, that's the remove section, just for my brain. Okay, all right.
Under D, that first full paragraph very briefly alludes to the Troy Village. The very next paragraph is about what seems to be the fate of settlement buildings. And I think that this is one of those instances where there's sort of no explicit mention of the fate of pre-colonial settlements. Just an example.
And is that first sentence completely true?
It is not anymore.
That's what I thought.
Maybe just the smallest city.
I don't think it's even the smallest city.
Can we get westernmost at least?
I think it's,
Well, I looked at that. Just,
I guess it
We've
depends
got
on how
nothing.
you define westernmost, actually.
it looks like Crescent City is further west by longitude.
Trinidad is nice.
We are the third smallest city in the state. There's 482, remember. Vernon and Amador City are small.
You shrink, got it. That's the message. That's the messaging going forward.
Getting more SCRs, then
Yeah.
they can wait.
Or we can annex Los Angeles, right?
Trinidad is in California.
There we go. Just back to point 4, Trevor, could you just put, going forward, and just a note in there, section temporarily removed on advice of city attorney, just so that anybody sees this without your staff report. Okay. Anything else on 10?
We got once more the 5 structures that predate 1930. Sort of omits what in the appendix might be considered historic properties, including sites, building structures. Historic properties include artifacts, records, and remains that are related to and located within such properties. So, in addition to, again, in addition to the 5 structures erected by white people, there's other settlements that exist. Archaeological sites, just pieces of evidence where it's how to be native structures and settlements.
It says there's 4 structures. 10 houses. Kind of those. So I'm sure you'll get feedback on that from the others, but something to read.
It's to reiterate my point, I read this whole paragraph, that in addition to those 5 structures, it's probably mentioning additional historic properties, since that term includes properties of traditional religious and cultural importance to an Indian tribe or Native Hawaiian organization, per this definition.
Was that language you were suggesting to add?
5 structures plus additional historic properties or something of that sort. Acknowledging that those historic properties included for this definition. Sites of cultural importance too.
This might be a nit, but I thought the Memorial Lighthouse was built in 1948.
Yeah, I think that might be wrong.
Yeah, we talk about buildings in the 1920s.
Yes, it was, and I think it's just. Yeah, there's something that makes it sound like it was built before. I think it's probably the original lighthouse.
Well, certainly not the Memorial Lighthouse.
It is the easternmost lighthouse in the city, though.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, even in its new location.
Okay.
So when you refer to the original lighthouse, did you need a date for that?
Yeah, what was the date of that?
1871.
Do you know, Eli, is that the structure that still exists up there today?
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, the city had our 50th, 150th anniversary in 1870 and then in 2021 they celebrated 150th anniversary. Yeah. Makes it 1870.
Thank you. You know, I don't even know how, you know, as we're talking about these things, this is just a very interesting and important thing to kind of do well. You know, this long history of this place, right? And I don't know if there would be any way, and I don't know how you would go about it, but almost a collaborative exercise for the writing of the history in a linear fashion of all the groups that play into the history and all. I don't know what that would look like, how that could even happen, but seems like a neat opportunity to kind of narrating one story. You know, I don't know, just popped into my brain.
Yeah, no, I actually, I mean, a lot of this is copied and pasted from various places. We do have a lot of the archaeological reports that have been done in the last few years have a lot of good succinct history. You know, at first I really didn't have anything in here because I was asking others to write it, including the tribal groups, and it just I never got it. So I put something in here to comment on. But yeah, I would love that. You know,
Yeah, so as a questioner, that is ideal for that. When we did the celebration in 2020, we distributed into the city. So if anyone has come subsequent to that, let me know, and I can give you a pin. It was attached to a one-sheet history that was prepared by that questioner regarding the city. And you know, when they celebrated the anniversary for the church this past year, the church, the Catholic Church, was Holy Trinity Church, was built in 1873. So when they celebrated that dedication, that history portion of it, then they had a reception over at the museum, and Patty Fleshner had a bunch of pictures and this historical data. And I've had a nice tour there where she has a lot of information regarding the Churai and the village. So it should be a great source for everyone.
Is there a curator of the museum? And if so, is it Patty?
She's the best place to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have other docents, but she probably will get them all organized to review this if we wanted them to.
And then the BLM may want to provide some information about plans.
All right, page 11. I bet there's something that most of us caught looking around to see. And knowing that this is taken from the county makes sense now. Board of Suits versus City Council in 1.1.4. Here's twice, just to,
Yeah,
but anything else anybody saw on 11 they want to talk about?
Just a bunch of programs. Many, I think, could be collapsed.
Yeah, 1.1.2, I would again lobby for changing buildings to properties.
Building structures and sites, maybe something like that, yeah.
Again, keeping properties consistent with.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
So this is just,
Yeah, discourage somebody from tearing down that demolition. Tearing that out. But it better,
well, I mean, the city could consider, you know, a historic building ordinance and designating certain historic structures. And those, and people can, generally it's an elective process, so there's incentives for getting tax breaks to be on the historic properties list, but then there are restrictions for what you can do.
seems like a planning commission. Like before you put on the remodel, that's gonna be bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think, or, I mean, you could consider it as part of your design review. You know, we have sort of done an inventory of what structures were built when, although I don't necessarily have all the information of what's been remodeled since then. But we could certainly, you know, as part of the staff report, look at when the building was built and what the characteristics are. I mean, it's just because something's old doesn't necessarily mean it's historically significant. There are other criteria.
Discourage. Try not to. Show some teeth. Say. Go ahead and see.
It could be, yeah, it could be part of your design review findings.
Where are you seeing that word, Tom? Help me out.
History of one.
Page
Oh,
12.
okay, sorry, page 12. Okay, cool. And just to clarify for me, Trevor, the city could create a historic district or a historic building ordinance, but an individual property owner would have to opt in. It wouldn't automatically, somebody can't say, hey, your house is historic, you're now tied up with anything you may or may not want to do to your structure.
I believe that's the case, but then if a project grows to the level of CEQA, if you had to do a CEQA document, and even the exemptions, there are exceptions if it's going to impact historic resources, but without like a historic resource assessment, we don't necessarily know if something's historically significant. So, you know, I think it would be, you could also have a regulation that says buildings over a certain age, you have to do a historic resources report.
You have a program here that requires archival research to be carried out determining the cultural and historic significance in 1.3.1.
To add that, from my understanding, the federal government uses 60 years. So anything after 60 years is considered of historic significance.
200 something structures in town that your report, I think Trevor somewhere I saw that
Yes,
were
but again, it has to be,
at least of age to potentially qualify.
yes,
Yeah.
potentially,
Yeah.
yes.
Wonder if Chevron qualifying on that.
All right, anything else on 12,
60 years from now.
right? Yeah,
I would just, you get it, right, but there's historic buildings in those paragraphs you were just discussing. I would
I just wanted to mention one additional thing since you're on the subject. I'm a member of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and it's a great group. They send out, I remember how often they send out their magazine. It's at least quarterly, it might be more often. But in there, they show buildings from all around the country where they indicate save, or they indicate that it was lost. They can save it. So they're a good source to, if we have something such as a town hall, we feel like, has some real historic significance. We could approach them and see, what would be suggested for other buildings in the city if it's some. And then when I was city manager at Rio Del, Alex Stillman was on the city council in Arcata, put together a group of about a half a dozen people. And they went through our city and created an inventory of all of the structures, especially along Main Street, and identified ones that they felt were significant. So that was very useful.
So do we have at least an approximate account of how many buildings in Trinidad are currently labeled with the plaque that either says historic or I can think of two.
that's Cottage.
Probably just be, probably the art gallery?
Yeah.
The church, the art gallery. I'm not sure about the library.
Yeah, well, that was moved, so that potentially changes its historic.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just curious if we knew.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are the
Town hall.
ones, yeah.
It's a plaque. That's true, right?
But those are ones that are 100 years. There. And I do. The map's over 10 years old now, but I do have a map that shows when all the various structures appeared into town. So you guys might be interested in seeing.
And then the rest of the appendices and not really much to do in there, right, Trevor?
I'm just noticing, there's two appendix twos.
Yes, which the second appendix teaching.
That's one that is start property.
Yeah, you can back now, right? Yeah.
Okay, here.
All right. I don't know, Trevor, if it's worth next time you reach out to them, I'll defer to you, but maybe just let them know that we're definitely very interested in all their input. And I don't know how the other commissioners felt about the idea of kind of trying to make it a more linear story of all the history kind of in one telling. And see if they had any thoughts on that or.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think also to Chris's point, how we've disaggregated prehistoric and historic cultural historic resources. Things. I mean, I get what you're trying to, what like this to be combined. I guess I'm struggling to like wrap my head around that, given what Trevor said, that they do have like different legal frameworks around, and like that's what I'm more familiar with. So, but I think that is like a good point and a good idea, but I don't know how. It'd be a lot of reworking this to make that happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a legal difference, and then there's also the difference with, archaeological resources do have a lot of the same protections as historic resources, but the tribal cultural resources is more, the tribe is going to dictate what happens and what's important, and the city doesn't really have have necessarily say or control over that. Where the historic properties are more, the city will dictate.
Just the background section can be broad.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
if they don't live in isolation of each other, right?
No. But I do like the idea of, extending the same protections, similar protections to both, so I mean, they can cross-reference.
I was just going to add, and I think Chris had touched on it, would be, so when you have the word cultural and the word historic, if we could, like, in both of those categories, talk about tribal interest and then talk about the other interests also, so that it doesn't show like a separation between cultural is just talking native and historic is talking business, like, so. Because there's cultural and historic elements for everyone.
Right. Shall we move on then? Trevor, you've got enough?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, agenda item number 3, policies on detached living space. Continued from our last meeting. This was kind of the one that was about that inspection, right? Item 0.4. So Trevor, take it away.
Yeah, so we talked about this in the last meeting, and the planning commission wanted to add to revise condition 4 to clarify that the inspections would not occur more than once per year without agreement from the building inspectors and the administrator and city manager, that another inspection is warranted based on evidence. And then you wanted to see the wording, and you also wanted to get some input from the building inspector. So I did reach out to the building inspector, and he thought the wording that I've proposed here is fine. He did also mention for 3, that it might be worth specifying that should occur. The building permits are issues that some just take a building permit. Restriction. So I clarified that, and then just the planning commission had said based on the evidence, and says is the evidence, and we could reword that because this isn't CEQA, but substantial evidence is defined in CEQA, and I think it kind of makes sense with this as well. So that I don't mean that an overwhelming amount of evidence, but it's just enough evidence that you can come to reason.
Any questions from the commissioners?
I think it looks good.
I think it was Richard, I think last time, who defined periodic for us, and I would suggest replacing periodic with episodic. Periodic implies everyday intervals, so I would suggest replacing periodic with episodic.
Where are you with that?
The standard conditions for detached living space, item 4, right? Owner to agree to episodic inspections / walkthroughs rather than periodic inspections / walkthroughs. I'm sorry, page 67, page 1 of 2 of the new planning commission.
Very well.
Yeah, I take your point. I'm not sure that's to everybody gonna clarify things.
Yeah.
What if we removed it entirely, just said owner to agree to inspections, and then the next sentence pretty clearly relates to frequency? Does that
I
work?
like that.
I think so, just because periodic does apply.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
yeah, we don't necessarily want that.
Yeah.
That'd be variable.
Yeah, I think this is great, Trevor. I did have one question on, I think it's thank you so much for running it by our building inspector and really appreciate his comments on 3, and I really like that. I just have kind of just a question. Let's say somebody pulls a permit and then never does the project. There is a process to remove a deed restriction, so they're not
Yes.
held to this thing that, okay, just want to make sure something like that existed. But I really like that. So that we don't run into a situation like happened with the Davies project that came before us that had a deed restriction that for whatever reason didn't get accomplished or recorded, right? So that's pretty cool. And then I kind of liked adding in to this. I really like the CEQA definition. And I would not be opposed to adding that in to substantial evidence in parentheses. What does that mean? That way we always know what the intent of this commission was going forward.
I could say as defined in CEQA, or I could just add the definition of the policy. Maybe a little footnote.
Yeah, footnote.
But other than that, I would suggest maybe as written today, because if CEQA for whatever reason change that down the road, we don't like it, then we're held to that. Versus if we put it in right now, word for word, then that's what we, I can't imagine it changing, in a meaningful way, but.
And you don't have to go look up.
Right. Anything else?
So, Trevor, we don't have to vote on this?
Yes, I mean, yes, yes.
Yeah, I just didn't see a motion.
So yes, we do, or no, we don't.
Yes, you could make a motion
Okay.
and approve or adopt this policy.
Well, I'll move to adopt the detached living space standard conditions as presented October 18, 2023, and as amended.
I'll second.
All right, first and a second, all those in favor say aye.
All right.
Opposed? All right, unanimous. Moving on to more of the Trevor Show policies for after the fact planning permits. This came after the Reimer.
Yeah, so this was another one I think from the last meeting, where this was their second after the fact permit. And so just gonna ask him, what would be an adequate deterrent? Not sure, we've had this discussion before, presented a little bit of that background information. It's difficult to find kind of standardized policies for after the fact planning permits. It's usually building permits. Trinidad requires planning review for more types of residential projects than is common. And so that's part of what's fine. And so, there's nothing. So, and for building permits, it's defined in the building code. It's basically feet. So, but generally, permits are, it is pretty standard that permits are processed and considering the findings and the requirements as if the action hadn't been taken. It might be a use, it might be a building, that's not necessarily always a construction project. And so it would be, consideration of the findings as if occurred. So you're not going to necessarily say, no, you can't do it and take it away just because. So that's pretty standard. And other than that, other than fines, I'm not really sure what else there is. So a couple of things I did see was a progressive rate structure. So if it's the first violation, that's a certain fine. That violation that's higher. So that might be something to consider. And then another model is coastal commission, where it's 5 times the permit fee. One of the problems though is for the coastal commission, it's a set fee based on the project. So they have a fee schedule where for Trinidad, it's based on the actual cost. So for example, if it's a controversial project, it could take a lot of time, and then they're to begin with. So, 5 times fee on a $1,500 permit versus $1,000 or $3,000 permit is, And there are things where, if something's not permittable, there could be remedial action. So, distribution, studies to show what was done or what needs, we're sensitive how it is. So those are things that can add to the cost and be a deterrent. I think part of it is more education outreach is another piece of that. And we do have some grant funding to work on our application forms and get some frequently asked questions up on the website, which I think would be cool. And get something that every couple of weeks, send out a little postcard that says, hey, to new property, whatever it is. So I think education outreach is a piece.
Thoughts, questions, comments from commissioners on this?
What didn't consider after the. It's all built.
Usually that's usually the case, but cutting a tree. That's another one we've dealt with as an after the fact.
Yeah, and I got real ugly
Yeah.
for a year.
Well, there's
Yeah,
potentially another one
Yeah.
coming to us, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So, but outreach, you're right. Maybe some tea 5 times. Cut down at all 5 times.
Yeah, 5 times not to exceed a certain amount or something too.
Guess wouldn't tell what you think.
I mean, I know that. So when I went through this process, getting an after fact permit, I recall the commission was unclear about the meaning of extenuating circumstances. Whether or not to assess double the fine or double the fees. And I guess I think allowing some amount of discretion to the commission, I think, in terms of how they assess if it's going to be double or 5 times, is, and not just having a blanket policy could be advantageous. I mean, not everyone in this community is either financially equal or it's equal playing field in terms of knowledge of our city policy. And as you acknowledged, Trevor, our policies are pretty complex, especially with regards to all the view stuff. And I think it is very plausible that someone could do a project knowing or thinking full well that they don't need a permit for it because they live somewhere else. So they need to think about that. And I don't want a 5 times the fee to be their education. They need to get a permit. But on the other hand, people who are here last month, property owners didn't even show up, and so they just paid this guy to be here. And it's harder to be. So I'm personally, I just like having some amount of discretion. Maybe the phrase extenuating circumstances isn't very clear, so maybe just discretion with some suggestions. Especially for serial offenders, I guess. Definitely. Do it more than once.
I suppose extenuating circumstances could be, oh, this is your second one, we're gonna do it more. It says, doesn't say whether that's more than less.
I think that struck me about being especially peculiar about that most recent was there's an item about like whatever extent possible construction shall minimize soil construction or instead of sediment entering watersheds or whatever, right? And it occurred to me that you can always pull down some structure that can be erected, but there's oftentimes irreparable damage to environments or new sheds or cultural resources that might occur if one starts goes forward with that. And in addition to doubling or tripling or using some multiplicative factor to process the cost of the permit, I think that there ought to be some consideration of the cost of the remediation, right? If there is environmental damage done, things, what's the cost of remediating? Or the project approval should be on the hook, whatever cost of remediation. Those irreparable damages that should be sort of most mindful.
That's covered a little bit in 3. And we did have a big, it was a property on Scenic Drive, and they removed vegetation, they put in trails, steps, they put a viewing pot. That was quite a bit extensive work. And so they were required to get, biological and geologic reports. Some of the work was approvable, some of it was not. A recreation plan. Pretty extensive.
Maybe at the end of 3, just explicitly stating at competence expense. Word expense, that's not my intention.
Yeah, I mean, even with a simple building project,
Yeah, we owe it to all that talking that we just did about cultural and to everybody around there. Probably, if not.
Those were other guys, cost recovery for things that are priceless.
Well, I sure like the idea, and maybe we can weave it in here somehow, of periodically sending out some education reach information, whether it's a year, but occasionally just remind people, particularly about trees. It seems to be something that people just feel like they have the right to do that. It's my tree. Their rules. So I really like that idea. And actually, when you think about it, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, but the number of times that we have had multiple infractions on the same property, probably count on one hand, right?
yeah.
So I'm not sure that from a practical standpoint that we need to get too draconian when it comes to the fines. I think with some outreach and doubling it for a second violation. Maybe it'll just turn people around, but I mean, I just don't know that we have that many that we're going to have to be concerned with. This one, the one last week, that was pretty blatant. I mean, there's no question. That's just horrible. But that I think is an outlier in many respects. And I don't think any amount of money would have changed the outcome. To tell you the truth. I don't know. I mean,
So we send out a water bill right now. So something.
Yeah, it could be a water bill, it could be a separate postcard. I don't know how easy it is to send a different notice to outside customers versus inside city customer. City.
Septic. That's a pretty decent list, right? The septic program.
So I mean, that's a little letter, and I think, maybe the city should try and. We don't always know when properties change hands, but usually we do. And so there could be a little, maybe it's the first water bill. Maybe it's when they sign up for a new account, water bill. Someone gets oh, by the way, you're in the coastal zone and different here than you might be used to. I think that's a lot of some, people from Reading that are used to doing.
Have we ever asked the county, the recorder's office, we know exactly which parcels by assessor number within city limits. If they get any business for that, they get a separate notification. Can they provide that service to us? If we give them something, if they know they're recording a deed and they say this, it's in this book of this parcel, it's within city of Trinidad, they get this letter mailed to them as well with their recording of the deed. And captured that. I don't know, just an idea. But I had very similar thoughts. I mean, most of them surrounding education, right? And I guess it's a big piece. And I can't wait for the FAQs and I don't know, is that going to be something that you're going to do? Is there somebody?
Maybe once we get those done.
Everybody
send
gets
out everyone.
Yeah. I did some poking around on the internet and just for examples of things like that. And really nobody has a strong fee structure that I found. Placer County has a very detailed after the fact submittal requirements. One of them they require is a wet stamp. Engineer architects attesting that everything is very specific. All these things apply to standards. So I think there's going to be, maybe a little bit of incentive with that, but a lot of places have an FAQ section that lists what projects do require permits and more importantly, what doesn't. Which is, if you want to do this, have at it, within these guidelines. And, what is the definition of maintenance and repair? How many square feet of sheetrock can you replace in your home? How much roofing can you do before it becomes a permitted thing? Or, that type of stuff. I saw a lot of examples of that kind of stuff out there. Both on the website, I think, the FAQ, and then, a lot of them tend to say, if you're in doubt, if you're asking this, one of them even said, if you're asking if you need a permit, you probably do, right? It was kind of like how they started there. So it was very well written. I can send you the links for the sites I found.
Yeah.
But just, work smart, not harder, steel, right?
Absolutely.
Nice,
On the school, I can plagiarize.
Yeah, right. No, but yeah, I mean, but look at it as some mechanism for change of ownership with the county, because that every change of ownership happens there and gets recorded there. And I don't know how we can get them to provide that service for us, but if they can, that might be an easy place to catch it, because real estate agents and title companies are everywhere in the country now. And then I don't know, the idea of the graduated penalty, the more times you come before us with this, it gets I don't know, it's not without merit, but I just struggle with, I don't want to really zing it to somebody that learns the hard way just through no ill intent. Just didn't know any better. You know? I feel bad enough sometimes doubling, you know what I mean? It's like, because we don't have a good way to figure that out that's user friendly yet. So until we do, I don't really feel like I want to do anything more harsh.
Good insight.
Yeah.
Very good insight. That was sad to see. Came through. But to see it's in here now. We got
Yeah, right, yeah. That's how you got
Motivational, right? Yeah. You need anything else really from this for us, Trevor, or is it more just kind of discussion and action for this one?
I think, I mean, do you want me to add applicant's expense to item 3?
Like that.
I don't know who else it would be, but yeah, if adding it in is, I mean, let's really spell it out. Let's do it. Yeah.
And I mean, this is something that, you know, we can put on the website.
Maybe as, you know, item number 1, all fees and so, you know, and any work, restoration, inspection will be done at the applicant's cost. First thing they read, right?
Yeah.
scared.
Anything else anybody wanted to see? Another version that would come back?
And then do you want to add anything in here that the city should periodically? I don't know if this policy is really placed for that.
I mean, I would hope we wouldn't need a policy to tell us to be good neighbors to our residents. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm also hesitant to put it until we have a resource.
You mean, should the city do something without a permit? Is that what you're saying?
No, but this policy, in addition to the standard procedures and conditions for applicants, should also say, and the city should do its part by, you know, providing information about permit requirements to the.
That's your education and outreach.
Yeah, I think there should be.
Anything else on this one?
Is there general agreement to add something?
Well, I'm thinking about that more. I mean, if you put that in here, I mean, I don't know that it actually really fits the point of this policy. This is an effect. That's not.
Yeah, I mean,
the back doesn't have anything to do with an after-fact permit. And if you put it in there, someone who's likely to have a fact permit, they well, I never got the notice saying, wow.
Well, could you add it to the purpose or under the purpose paragraph, say something to the effect that in addition to these guidelines, the city shall provide periodic, episodic.
well, I think, you know, maybe it's something that, you know, ignorance of the rules is not an excuse, you know.
However, the city will make its best
However, the
effort to.
city will, yes, maybe something like that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then in all this educational piece, you know, I hear periodically, episodically, I hear occasionally from people at varying times, you know, the permits are just a money grab by the city. And I mean, these are, my understanding, barely a break-even proposition for the city at some of our current rate structure. It's more about life safety, right? For now and into the future, ideally for building permits, that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's worthwhile to put in there as an
Sure.
education piece, just to really contextualize why do permits exist? Well, to make sure that you know what you're doing when you build a structure so it doesn't fall down, so it doesn't catch fire, so it, I don't. On that one.
It's just caught my attention for the first time, but phrase, the responsible party has the option to apply for permits or to rectify. It's kind of like soft, and almost like it's like it's condoning this. I guess maybe it is, right?
In the background, do you see that? Yeah.
Yeah. The trust party has the option to apply for the appropriate permits. I mean, yeah, but as a last resort.
Did they really have the option, or they mandated to? I mean, if the city becomes aware of something.
As it would be as an alternative to removing
Yeah.
the
Or-
work, they have the option.
Or an alternative to legal action or lien on the property.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they don't have to.
But then the
Right,
city would do, yeah,
Take action.
Unless it were unsafe, in which case the city would imagine could
yeah, I like that.
forcibly cause you to remove something that's unsafe.
Oh,
I would hope. Trevor, if somebody builds something that's just blatantly unsafe and unsound, the city could go in and force them to remove it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I guess using legal action.
Yeah. Has the ability to apply for appropriate permits to come into compliance with something. Yeah.
Obligation. For permitted work. That is otherwise potentially consistent with the regulations that the town board has the obligation to apply for appropriate permits.
I like as an alternative to enforcement action.
That's true, which could be any number of things, right? Right.
So I will amend this and bring it back.
Moving on to commissioner reports. Do you have anything to report?
Yeah, I'm quite pleased to see, and Trevor, you alluded to it, that the coastal commission is bringing back the Van Wyck Trail. That was from the trail committee.
Yeah, well, so they heard the appeal on the 6-month closure in their September meeting. They found no substantial issue, which means in the 6-month closure could technically start. So, but they made it very clear that they want to see something in 6 months. And commission itself, not just staff. So they were not, they made the point that public access is important, and that they want to see some solutions. And so we have scheduled monthly meetings actually with the commission staff. So we've had two meetings. They were pleased with the progress we've made. I mean, time is ticking by very quickly. We are, and I'm not sure that we're going to have solutions set in stone in 6 months, but we are making progress.
Maybe I'm confused, but I'm talking about the one that goes to the harbor.
Yeah.
Right, 6
Yeah.
months, so for that one?
So yes, but it's super complicated. I mean, it's super complicated because the TAS and New York Tribe have said they want to close. Coastal Commission have said they want it open. There aren't super easy fixes. It's already kind of up on private property potentially. And then there's the stormwater drain also complicates things there. So it's not a simple
water piping going through there as well, right?
The water pipe will be that will be.
Well, that's getting
replaced.
done.
That's getting replaced. But the storm drain, there's really no other solution except to pump it. Put them out. This station, which is-
Some kind of that view of water in or at least,
Well, it can't be infiltrated there. It's about getting the pipe across the slide. With that, and because we don't want the pipe to fail and then.
I thought that was not excited to say that it's a great trail. And there's a couple of different options. Anyway, we'll see. So exciting to be there. Everything else is talked about. On signage, we're looking at signage. Do you have any creative signs out there in the world that you run into from to me or yes, and yeah, just any information to make it better. Looking at the benches, what benches?
Along that same vein, we had talked about the gate at the top, road, rock, lane. Just notice when I walked by there today, they made like a little half dish so that you can walk around it, but I could use a sign there, one of our trail signs. There's two gates on there, and the lower gate has a sign, but the upper gate does not.
Great, thanks. And it was recommended from the ancestral, it's like something that can be pounded into the ground was preferable to dig something up and then put concrete in. So it's methods out there. Yeah, that's a start right there of even their system or something. It's like how to put it into the ground. So that's what I meant by encouraging from what I heard. They weren't mentioning that for the trail, but that was one thing they were.
I think so.
Water Advisory Committee met finally. We have another meeting coming up in November. We've decided to meet a little more frequently right now. Just some highlights from that. They did really like or agree with our approach of just kind of continuing to monitor water usage rather than taking it again. It's right now. No needs as far as data info. They feel like they're getting everything they need. There's not really any assistance from us. Very much like the idea of Trevor's postcard mailer suggestion and the one we kind of talked about to show your year over year use or month over month, whatever format that would look like. Just some update on our water treatment plant. We currently have a T2 that is ready to take their T3 exam shortly, which in theory will put us having our own city employee now that can run the plant. And we would then be able to back away from the unsustainable Coleman engineering contract that we have right now that we continue to have, which is, I pointed out, been north of $600,000 since we first began that contract with them. Behind that individual, we have an operator in training who is taking their T2 exam beginning in November. And then there are other employees, some longstanding employees that are becoming interested in the water program at plant. So cautiously, the majority of the committee was cautiously optimistic. I remain skeptically optimistic because my belief is that we're not corkscrewing, we're coming back around on the merry-go-round with the same thing again, that we keep coming and hoping plan A is going to work, and when it doesn't, we do plan A again, plan A again, plan A again. At some point we need to come up with plan B, whatever that would be. There was also some questions about the consumer confidence report that came out. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It comes out, it's published, I think, in January of every year for the water sampling that happens in July. There were two values that were noted by a member of the community. One was E. coli, that there was concern over, and it turned out that was just understanding the, in my opinion, poorly designed state mandated table. It was showing a maximum allowable value of one sample, and it was being interpreted, oh, we had one. No, that's just the max. Our reading was 0. The other one that came up was copper in the water lines, and an educational piece that all of us are learning is that copper levels are measured at, I believe it's 10 different, basically residences or starting points in our system, not at the plant. The plant has no copper, so any copper readings that show up in the system from these tests are going to be a result of somebody's personal pipes. And there was one that was out of value. So on the report, it looks like we've got copper in our water, but really 123 Main Street has copper in their water and everybody else. So it was just kind of an interesting thing to learn. But with that, we're want to make that report less boilerplate and dry and a little bit more user-friendly, the information more accessible, because there's a lot of communities around us that do a better job. So that's something we're tackling. I think that's it for the WAC.
Was there any update about the tank replacement project?
Yes, there was. It was just an update basically on what the council decided that we had to change the scope. We're not getting, I believe it's a 300,000 gallon tank. Now we're going to get a 250,000 gallon stainless tank. We're still sticking with stainless because it's the durability of it. So the plan is to go with 2 250s eventually instead of 2 300s. So losing a little bit of overall capacity, but that's still going forward.
The construction's underway on that?
The prep work, there's a tree survey, I think, that has to happen first. Where trees are getting disturbed. And so all those things are kind of happening. And then of course, weather and rainy season, but it is in progress.
It takes a bit dismantled or
No, yeah.
on water pressure down
A copper in your line.
That unpermitted work.
Right, yeah.
I don't have anything other than like,
on Monday, we had the STR committee meeting, which not engrossing. I mean, very little stuff of consequence to us was mentioned. I guess regarding tonight's discussion, there's been an effort to do better cost tracking of what an STR application actually costs. And there was a recommendation made to the council to update the fee structure in a way which covers those costs. That was the thing we did was make that recommendation to the council. Told them that study it. Did not, but otherwise, that's what we got done. 2.5 hours, 3 hours. There's technical glitches. Everything that the chair said, Eli had to repeat horizontally. We've been there.
Yeah. Right. Trevor, anything else from a staff standpoint?
So I do still have some things to wrap up. So LEAP and SB2 grants are done, but there are a couple of unfinished things that we still have to wrap up. Permit regulations. We worked on those. I think the coastal hazards planning project is far enough along. I'm going to start getting the background report. Safety element. So getting back into that, updating that report so that we can get back to the safety element. So getting back into the general plan update, the LCP grant, and brief grant tasks, which were the questions. So start with a little bit of background on annexation, as I mentioned. I did update our future agenda items. I think we the management plan is we're updated, we're incorporating that into the cultural resources elements. A lot of that was found in the section on the study area, which is in there. And then rainwater catchment, they're working on both the demonstration project and some creative. So I took those off and then I added annexation. I guess just one other question is I've been doing staff reports that aren't staff reports in a memo format, and then this month, and I'd done it in the past too, but I had some, I guess I went back with some. So this is a little bit different. Staff reports looking like this, so if anybody has a preference or comments on the memo format versus this format. It's more follows more of the city council format.
Right. Anything else for future agenda items? And
There's gonna be that, training, November 3rd.
cert training, yeah.
So
There's a wait list, so if you're interested, please sign up.
I'm reluctant to mention this as a future agenda item. That's thinking back to the discussion from tonight and several previous discussions. It would be nice when we're making decisions related to resources to know. Just realize there's legal issues there, but I'd like to explore to whatever extent possible, not a survey of those resources or anything of that sort, but just sort of knowing the types of resources we're talking about, etc. So securing meetings that we as decision makers can make more informed decisions. And there's legal issues there. Just get an assessment of some kind of the types of resources that we're discussing.
I think that's something we can see if we can get in the cultural resource.
Jack, we'll give you one shot as a member of the public up there. If you have anything, been ignoring you all night, apologies. Nothing?
I'm good. It's just been great listening to you guys tonight. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Jack. All right, then with that, we are adjourned. Oh, yeah. That's it. Nope, we're adjourned.